Hi, this is Dan Gilbazan, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
How are you?
I don't know what's going on with me.
I can see that. I believe you.
Strange. Power. I feel I got so much. I got so much anger.
I can see that. I can see you don't want to be here. I can see you're scared. I can see you don't know what's happening to you. I can see that you don't want to hurt anybody. It's gonna be all right.
Got a clear shot. Standing by.
I don't want them shooting
I'm
me.
not gonna shoot you. You guys, this is my buddy Max. I told you about Max. No one shoots at Max. You and me, okay? It's just you and me talking. Whoa, stay right there. Stay right there. Just be careful. The breaks, the electricity.
I just wanted everyone to see me.
He makes a move, you take that shot.
How about you come with me?
Okay.
Go somewhere we'll talk. Away from all these people, okay?
Yeah, yes.
You are now on the inside of what I like to call the circle of trust. We are all connected in the great circle of life.
You know something, Bert? What? I think you and I are going in circles.
It feels like we're going in circles.
The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Because it's a circle.
Yeah, we heard about the circle.
Yes, we're familiar with shapes.
Hi, this is Chuck.
This is Greg.
And this is Dan, and we are Talking in Circles, brought to you by the Geekcast Radio Network, the podcast that gets no respect. Yes, we're just like Rodney Dangerfield, getting absolutely no respect. And in vein of Rodney Dangerfield, today we'll be discussing comedic icons as we try to come up with who should fit in the Mount Rushmore of comedy. But before we get to that, how's the week been going for you guys?
Not too bad. Same stuff pretty much, except for tonight when I got home from work. I was kind of surfing online a little bit, and my phone rings. So it's a number I don't really recognize. So I kind of answer it with the questionable tone, like hello. And all of a sudden it's like this lady like screaming into the phone in Spanish. And like I have no idea what she's saying. And I'm like, I kept saying like hello, hello. And she's like going off. She's like saying tons of stuff. I'm like, do you speak English? She's like, no. And she's like saying more stuff. And I'm like, we understood that. I'm like, what the hell? So I'm like, I speak English. I'm like, I don't understand you. And all of a sudden I hear her go, ay. I'm like, how the hell are you understanding me right now? Yet you won't speak to me in English. So I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't understand you. I speak English. And I was like polite about it though, but I hang up the phone. Just kind of had a chuckle out of it. Like 3 minutes later, calls back, same number. I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. Answers the phone. She's like going off saying stuff again. I'm like, I do not speak Spanish. I don't understand you. Please don't call here again. And she's just like, oh, yeah. I'm like, first of all, how do you call me and expect me to speak your language and then get mad when I don't?
Or you think somewhere in there she would realize she's not talking to the person that you're meant to be talking to.
I know, like, what would give it away? Like the fact that I'm not speaking Spanish?
Wow.
I should have gave it my best George Bush voice and been like, no hable, señorita.
I'm once again hungry for Mexican food, thanks.
Greg, how's your week been going?
I also had an interesting conversation over the phone because I had to get a friend out of a date. It wasn't quite as amusing as Chuck's Hispanic lady, but it was interesting because I had to play my one friend was on a date, and so I had to play her dad, which was interesting.
That sounds pretty funny, actually.
No, calm down. Your mother and I were in an accident. I'm fine, but they're taking your mother to the hospital. That was my dad voice.
Wow.
Impressive.
The guy
Intimidating.
The guy apparently went for it.
So I guess, did you talk to him? I'm kind of confused.
No, I did the voice just in case sometimes you could hear people on the other
I
side
see.
of the phone if you're across the table. I'm not sure if I'm a loud talker on the phone or not, even though everybody asked me to repeat things about 5 billion times. But
Interesting.
I thought you meant you were playing his dad and you were telling us. Like, that's horrible.
I totally tricked him.
He's in the hospital right now waiting.
But I nailed the voice.
Wow, that's rather random. You think it'd be easier just to say, "Hey, I'm not going out on a date with you."
Yeah.
Whatever works.
I'm just waiting for it to come back at me, like somewhere down the road. I'll be hanging out with this girl, and she'll be like, "Oh, I got a phone call. Hold on," and then it'll be like, "Oh, it's my dad," and I'm like, oh, "Fuck!" Just run, right?
You might need a favor back. You might need a girl's voice faked. She could return the favor.
Well, yeah. I'm pretty sure that you, the master of disguising your voice, could help me out there, though. You could do an awesome girl voice, right?
I don't know. I never really tried it, actually.
Plus, you don't have to imitate my mother, because that's the only real... it's my mother or my grandmother. Those are the only two women in my life that could be really calling me for the most part.
Chuck, you could do the whole Adam Sandler mom voice.
Yeah. Do it for mama. Or you could do,
baby, yeah.
If you want your mom to be Kitty from that 70s show, maybe I could do the laugh or something.
Nailed it.
Anyways, it's a randomness.
What have you been up to, Dan?
This past weekend, I had my wife had a lot of her friends down, so they had a girls' weekend, and I kind of stayed away. But
pillow fights, right?
Not so much. No.
Yeah, don't do that.
No. Yeah. Sorry to crush your dreams.
I'm more sorry for you than for me, Dan. It's not like I could experience a pillow fight all the way up here.
Well, true. No, but what I did do was I kind of stay out of the house. But I played in this football league, and we had 2 games this weekend, and it sucked because we were undefeated. We're 4-0 coming into this weekend, and we lost both games. Both came down to the final play, so it was like, some tough losses. So. Not that matters, but anyways, it was kind of in the line of last week's episode when we talked about the NFL draft a little bit.
Did they draft you in the first round?
I was a free agent pickup. It was like yeah.
You were a walk-on success.
Exactly.
Nice.
I was like the Antonio Gates of the league, I guess.
But what's your stat line look like, Dan?
A flat line right now, just a lot of zeros. No,
I don't like to you.
No, I have no idea. Scored a touchdown in the last game, but I couldn't tell you.
Very nice.
All he does is catch touchdowns.
The other thing I did last weekend was go see the new Spider-Man movie, Amazing Spider-Man 2, that came out. And I guess I think we've all saw that, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. But I guess before we get to that one, just a brief idea of what I thought of the last Amazing Spider-Man movie, which not the Raimi Spider-Man, but the other one, the new reboot or whatever they want to call it, the first era of the Garfield. That one I liked enough. I didn't think it was nearly as good as like Spider-Man 2 or anything like that. I liked the actors and stuff like that, and I was mildly looking forward to this one coming up. I think we all had kind of worries when we saw how many characters they were throwing in here and all that. And I think those worries were validated for the most part. I overall was not the biggest fan of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. There are elements I really liked. A lot of the actors I thought were really good. Andrew Garfield is probably a better Spider-Man than Tobey Maguire. And I think his relationship with Gwen Stacy and Emma Stone is so much better than that of Mary Jane and Peter Parker in the last franchise. But I just think it was just so rushed. I thought the characters were really underdeveloped and really generic in some instances. Like, I was not a big fan of Jamie Foxx as Electro at all. I liked Dane DeHaan as the Green Goblin, but his entire storyline kind of was summed up in like 15 minutes. One of the most epic comic book stories of all time. And It was given like no service whatsoever. So overall, not the biggest fan. What did you guys think of Amazing Spider-Man 2? Chuck, what did you think?
Well, I'm kind of along the same lines as you. I know I read your review earlier on Geekcast Radio of the movie, and I agreed with it quite a bit. I will say I probably did like it a little more than you. There's a lot of great things that I liked about it, which you kind of alluded to already, like the human element in it, the personal interaction between people was like really well done, I thought. Like you were starting to talk about, the more I watch these movies and then the more I watch the older Tobey Maguire movies, I'm really starting to feel that Andrew Garfield is a better Spider-Man, and I'm thinking I'm actually liking him more as a Peter Parker too. I think Tobey Maguire was like a little too wimpy a lot of the times, and I feel like Garfield conveys his emotion a lot better. Like he's more believable. He comes off as kind of troubled, but he's not like a crybaby. You know, he kind of shows more of an adult way to handle things. He has more of a spine as far as like standing up to people, and I really like his confidence. He not only has confidence like in his abilities, but when he faces his enemies, like when he faces Electro and the Goblin, and even like in the last movie, the Lizard and stuff, he has like a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I think he has a lot more fun with the role. Like, I think he decides to, like, I'm gonna have fun with this and joke around, and it's more like that witty Spider-Man that we've kind of expected, come to love. So
yeah, it's like it's right out of the comics, like his dialogue, his insults and stuff. It really reflects that a lot. In this movie, they did an even better job of it, I think. Just some of the things that he was saying, like in the middle of his fights and stuff, it was really entertaining. And I think like he had some confidence there talking to Gwen too. In the first movie, when they showed them kind of asking each other out, they were both super shy and everything. But in this movie, you see that shy guy kind of go away. He's a little bit more confident in his like speaking to Emma Stone and all the other people in his life. It seems like he's kind of coming into his own, stuff like that. But you mentioned the Goblin character and how it's such a great story, and I think it was really underdeveloped in this movie, really too quickly done. I realized they had to pack a lot into this one movie, but maybe that was kind of the problem. It seemed like really rushed,
Oh yeah, definitely. Like if you count, totally, Peter Parker and Harry Osborn have 2 scenes together, and one with him and Spider-Man, and then like that's it. It's like, all right. I like those scenes. I like them together. I think they like do come across as friends, and they do have some, like you said, some human moments. But it felt like it was leading to that moment, like leading to something, and then it just like it's like when you read a comic and you skip and you miss a few issues, and then you pick it up and you're like, oh, I missed something. Like that's what it felt like. It felt like there were issues missing in this comic.
Yeah,
that we didn't get.
They did a decent job of kind of portraying that friendship, but it didn't feel like, I don't know, okay, they haven't seen each other in like 10 years, and so finally they're kind of like rekindling that relationship a little bit, and it just felt, it's like, okay, we walked down to the river, we had this talk, and now we're suddenly best friends again.
Yeah.
Like it didn't really sell me on that. Like I don't know what you guys thought about that, but
I don't know, Greg, what did you think of I guess the whole movie as a whole and that relationship?
Well, I thought it was weird that Andrew Garfield did not eat lasagna at all.
You know what? And he had no issues with Mondays.
Right? It was weird. Yeah. And there was no yellow dog. I was just thrown off by that. All right. Easy jokes aside, I thought it was much better than the first franchise, and I agree with you guys about the whole Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield is a much better Peter Parker / Spider-Man. I never liked Tobey Maguire in the Spider-Man roles. He just kind of made me feel ooky.
I think Garfield does make a better Spider-Man, but I don't think he makes a better Peter Parker. Maybe more so in this one, though he doesn't have much to do as Peter Parker. I like Tobey Maguire. I do agree at times he got a little too whiny, but I also feel like he has an everyman quality that you need in Spider-Man. And
I think he looked dopey, though. Peter Parker's supposed to be smart. Tobey Maguire just looked dopey the entire time.
I guess to me, he conveys intelligence a lot more than Andrew Garfield does. Like Andrew Garfield's character doesn't. You never get the sense that Peter Parker is also an intelligent like mind or has that scientific mind at all. They don't. Well, one, they don't really spend much time exploring that territory.
Well, they kind of go into him and like making stuff up and inventing things in the first one where he's making his web shooters and everything, and him going through the science with Emma Stone, which I thought it was weird that they made her smarter than him. So I think they were trying to make up for that a little bit.
Yeah, and I agree in the first one you see that. In this one you don't at all. And like I was gonna point to that, like he kind of doesn't like he talked like Emma Stone basically talks down to him like, weren't you in third grade science? And he's supposed to be a great scientific mind. You think he would know that, or So
well, he's also got some detective genius skills working in there too a little bit.
Yeah, he becomes partially Batman as he goes into the parent Peter Parker Bat Cave that exists in the subway.
That whole part seemed like really unnecessary. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I think like there was a way that he could have seen that information, taken in that information without like going there and experiencing that. I felt like it just led to nowhere. It was like this big elaborate thing. Like here up pops this thing and it's all secretive, and then they didn't do anything with it, you know?
No, the only reason I felt like that was there was so that you know that the serum's not going to work on Harry Osborn because you need to have Peter Parker's, DNA in order for it to work. But it does feel like a leftover scene from last movie, because that was like what they sold that movie on, was like, finally you get to find out what happened to Peter Parker's parents. You didn't, but here we kind of do. And it just, I don't know, to me, like that huge mystery that they built up over 2 movies, and it was just kind of, it wasn't all that great of an answer to that mystery. It's basically, oh, he was selling weapons, so we ran away, and then we uploaded this video in the most inconvenient way possible.
Also with those things, they kind of had to edit some things out, because in number 2 they had just Peter there in the hall with his parents as they were leaving, but in the first one, Uncle Ben and Aunt May were there hanging out, and there were some other little things that I don't remember, but I watched the first one and the second one because Chuck lent me the first movie after I saw the second one very graciously. Thanks,
sharing the love.
That's right.
Yeah, it's funny too. Like, I know we were talking, to go back a little bit to the Harry Osborn thing. I felt like they maybe could have started that in the first movie, just to kind of introduce him, and maybe would have built up that friendship a little more, and then it would have made the moment that Harry kind of turns, it would have made it like even more shocking and more like riveting and stuff like that. Because I guess him kind of turning after such a short build up to their relationship, I don't think it was as effective. And I know Greg and I were talking about this too. When he takes the, well, first let me say too, we're doing a little bit of spoilers here. I'm going to try not to give up too much, but
honestly, I don't think we can give up more than was given up in the trailer.
Yeah.
Literally the last scene of the movie is in the trailer.
I know.
So
the 8 different clips and trailers and crap that they released too, but
I'll put a little bit of a stinger at the beginning saying, hey, there'll be spoilers, and give them a timestamp. So feel free to spoil the hell out of the movie. So
alrighty. Yeah, and I know Greg and I talked a little bit about this after we saw the movie. When Harry kind of injects himself with the spider venom, and I know, Dan, you mentioned this on your review too, it kind of didn't make sense, because it's like, wouldn't you like test this first? Like, you just like, well, there's this vial of green stuff, let's just jam it into my veins.
Plus he's transforming and dying much faster than his father was. His father was like, what, in his 50s or 60s?
Yeah,
that made
and he's
no
going
sense.
through it in his, what, teenage years? What the hell?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, oh, you're dying in 30 to 40 years, but I'm gonna need this now. I just that was the issue. It's like a lot. I mean, the motivations were there for some of those characters, but they were so either broad or so like rushed that didn't really make sense. Like the Harry Osborn thing is perfect, because it's like, oh, I need this blood immediately. I need to inject it into myself. And like you mentioned, I'm like, well, you have $1 trillion scientific lab like feet away from your like house. Why not, I don't know, try to test it a little bit? Or why just like, oh, this, I don't know. That to me was like, it was a little bit of a rush. And like him becoming the Green Goblin was just because of happenstance. And like, oh, I found this file online about this healing suit that I'm going to put on and also have pumpkin bombs for no apparent reason. It's just,
yeah. Well, even when he's on the floor after he injects himself and he's like, writhing in pain and like, surely he's not able to concentrate on anything, but he happens to look up and sees this armor, and it's kind of like, oh, I have to just get to that and put that on right away.
Oh,
like,
this is so convenient. Oh.
I mean, I realize, like, they tell you that it has healing abilities, but like, how is that your first option? Like, I don't know. Like, he's just like, oh, I have to crawl to that and get into that, and then I have to jump on this glider and fly around. and also be really good at using this glider, even though I've never done it in my life.
It comes with the serum.
Since we're talking about the kind of origins of villains, I thought Electro's kind of how he got his powers was really strange, of just falling into a vat of water with electric eels, because I'm pretty sure over the years that's probably happened to people in real life. And they just die. So it was kind of a giant leap. I know we have a spider biting a guy and he transforms, but at least it's radioactive. I don't think they did the greatest job of explaining Electro's origins. And I also found a website that has like news thing where it was like 10 things that they found kind of wrong or weird or left unexplained. And another thing with Electro, when they have him at Ravencroft, they put him in water to imprison him, but he has nothing over his mouth. Like, there's no breathing device. But they postulated that since he's just made of electricity, that he doesn't need to breathe, which the people on the website made a good excuse for him. But there were some other things in there too.
That was kind of weird how they did that too. Like, oh, I could just jump into the socket and like, yeah. I don't know.
Plus,
that was a
plus where the hell did he get a suit from?
I know that has a lightning bolt on it.
Macy's, yes. Come on. Macy's has that stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
yes. Excuse me, sir. Can you please fit me for an Electro suit?
The guy's getting electrocuted while he's measuring him.
We need another guy over here.
Yeah.
But what about like? What'd you guys think of his dialogue as Electro? Like, wasn't it like really corny and childish at times?
Well, I think the character was supposed to be corny and a little bit childish. She's not really well socially developed, so that didn't bother me too much.
And I know I read that on Dan's review, and I laughed when I read it because I had the same exact thing written down. It sounded like a Saturday morning cartoon. for like little kids, like some of the stuff he was saying, like
the Superhero Squad TV show. Yeah. I mean, I did obviously like that character was just, it was a broad like his look, his nerdy look. I was like, oh, it looks like a nerd from a Saved by the Bell TV episode. It's like the pocket protector, the crazy hair. I'm like, oh, come on now, like. I mean, I get it. Like, he's supposed to be crazy, but he's also a scientist. So you think he would, I don't know, be articulate a little bit. I honestly think if you get rid of Electro completely, this movie can be so much better. You can like develop that Harry Osborn storyline. You can really make that last moment mean something. Because like, we are doing spoilers, so I guess we'll have to get there eventually. But like the Gwen Stacy dying moment, like I thought
what?
I know.
What?
Surprisingly, when Gwen Stacy had graduation speech is about death, she dies at the end. Who would have saw that coming?
What?
I know.
My mind and the teenage girls that were sitting behind us, minds blown.
Yeah,
there were some people in the theater that had some funny reactions behind us because it's funny, like when you're always a comic book fan, like you know what's going to happen and. You know, you kind of wait for other people's reactions because they have no clue what's coming.
There for Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. And like, you know, everything they did as a cute couple, people were like, oh. And I'm thinking they have no idea she's gonna die in about 5 minutes. And but it was funny, like when he caught her with the webbing and she kind of like, snapped her neck or hit her head, however they did it. It looked like she hit her head almost too.
Yeah.
It was very close.
Yeah, but the people behind me were like, "Oh my God, did she die?" And then like they would wait and be like, "I think she did. Oh my God." And it was just funny to listen to everybody that like didn't know that was coming, but.
Yeah. I mean, I did like the moment, like Garfield, I think he's a really good actor besides just these Spider-Man films. I liked him in a lot of stuff. And I thought that was actually a really great moment, like him, like, because that was, like I said, that relationship actually I thought worked and he really sold it. But it doesn't work. Like, it could have been so much better. In the comic, the Green Goblin Spider-Man story kind of built to this crescendo where that was like a defining moment. But that was the only moment that those two characters had.
Yeah.
It was like, it's like, starting a movie and going right to your climax and then ending. It's like, well, kind of build some stuff up here.
Well, they kind of did with Detective Stacy. Like they built it up with him a little bit in the first one of don't stick around my daughter, something might happen to her. They built it up that way. I know they needed to build it up better with the Green Goblin, but at least they built it up some way with him. I found it a little weird that Stacy kept popping up, but
Dennis Leary has nothing else to do. Yeah, I mean, agree. Like the death of her makes sense because it was clearly leading to that in a lot of different ways. Once you see dead Dennis Leary in a cop car, you're like, okay, Gwen Stacy's gonna die because he's gonna screw up, and then, But like you mentioned, it was more so in how it was the Green Goblin that did it. It meant something because it was such this back and forth between the characters, and it was finally like, all right, that is that is the top moment. Like where do you go from there? Like what more can he do? Unless he kills Spider-Man, like he's now killed his love, his like the relationship that he's cherished the most, maybe besides his aunt. Like where else how can they top that without, on a personal level? So it so wants to get to that Sinister Six that it doesn't really care how it gets there. It's just going to try to push as much stuff in there as we could. So
yeah, and that Green Goblin storyline is something that needs to kind of stew and kind of develop because Green Goblin knows Peter's identity for a long time, and it's just kind of that back and forth, like toying with him, and you kind of deprived of that a little bit in this because it was so rushed, and that's what makes that climax so thrilling, in the comic. It's because like he kind of knows it's Peter and he's messing with him this whole time, and then he finally takes the one thing from him that like means the most, and I guess it's still a shocking moment, but you get deprived of that a little bit in this.
Yeah, like it works within the relationship between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, but with the relationship between Green Goblin and Spider-Man, not so much. But I guess we can maybe talk about like the action overall, because a lot of those issues, I kind of like I mentioned in my review, we kind of expected some of those. And overall, I thought the action, I liked the beginning, like car chase. I thought like, oh great, we're starting off a really high note here. I really like this. It's Spider-Man being wacky and fun.
I had a problem with that actually.
Really? Okay.
I seriously do. I seriously did enjoy this movie, and I like it so much more than the first franchise. But I found it weird that Spider-Man's joking, which I love. I like that he's joking, but he's pausing and taking time while I forget and I don't know how to say his actual name, but the Rhino is just
Paul Giamatti.
Yeah, Paul Giamatti is just plowing people over and like running through traffic, and he's just there sitting jokes. In the comics, he's making jokes, but he's also moving and trying to get shit done while doing jokes.
True.
So
true.
I found that a little unsuperhero like.
I could agree with that.
That was my only fault with the.
Yeah. What I did like about that though is like how it displayed like the web shooting and like it was first person a little bit but not too much, and how it would like move the camera. It felt there was a lot of physicality to the movement. Obviously 10 years since like the first Spider-Man movie, that they've greatly improved upon that. But after that, there were some really interesting. There were moments I liked, like in the Times Square sequence where it does like the spider sense, and you see how he's going to kind of save all these different people from Electro, and then like webbing the railing to stopping the car. But like the final just Electro him showdown, I just felt it got really repetitive, and it was just him dodging electric bolts over and over again. There was like
the
no
Itsy Bitsy Spider thing was fun though.
Yeah, I don't know. There was like no progression to the action. Like if I look at something like the train sequence in Spider-Man 2, which is far superior to anything in this movie, that's a situation that works because the motivations of those characters are clearly thought out, and then there's a progression to that action. There's a clear defined motivation, and you know what's happening, and there's a build up, a letdown. It goes, and it's always something a little bit different that subverts your expectations. And this, it was just kind of like, okay, he's gonna jump and miss electricity for 15 minutes. So I don't know if I'm alone on that. I guess, Greg, it sounds like you disagree with me.
Well, I enjoyed the little bit about the Itsy Bitsy Spider part. I wasn't totally wrapped up in the action at that end scene that you were talking about. I did enjoy the first initial chase scene with Paul Giamatti on superhero like aside. I thought it was really good, and I like seeing how Spider-Man kind of jumps, flips around. He's a lot more like the comics, like Chuck's been saying for a while.
Yeah, I love the agility of him in this movie, and like even the first movie. But I feel like they're finally doing justice to his powers and abilities, like just lightning fast reflexes and flips and jumps and spinning and twisting. I thought it was superior to how Sam Raimi did it in his movies. I think he just looks so much more spider-like in how he moves. I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Anything else we need to touch on? I guess
I have something I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
I felt the music was kind of out of place for this movie.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It really took me out. I felt it was like really bombastic. There were a couple songs in there that were fine and fit well with what was going on, but I felt like others were really out of place and really bombastic where they really shouldn't have been.
It felt like the Superman, like the John Williams Superman score at times.
Kind of, it was trying to be like really heroic, and that's not really the character of Spider-Man. He's heroic, but it's not like a Superman, like you said. It's Spider-Man. Like he's a street level guy.
I didn't like the one Electro song at Times Square where they have inner monologue coming through the score, like where you like hear it stop.
Oh yeah, where he's like schizophrenic or something.
I thought that was a little bit much. I was just like, all right, it's just like it. To me, it was at first confusing because I'm like, is he like talking because he's electrified through something? Does he need? And then I was like, oh no, it's the score. And then too, like the score they had for, I forget his regular name. It's Max something.
Max Dillon.
Max Dillon. When he was Max Dillon, like the doop to doop score, like it was like really, it felt like a Looney Tune score behind him every time he was walking. It's like, just in case you don't realize, he's kind of a dork. Here's this song that kind of...
If the glasses and the hair didn't tip you off.
Yeah, so I agree. I wasn't a fan of the music.
I did love the interaction in the beginning where Spider-Man actually saves him, and just the interaction he has with him, and I thought that was really funny. And he had him like lick his glove, and then he parted his hair and stuff, and he's like telling him, "I need you, or my eyes and ears." I thought that was well done, but I do have a couple of things left that I wanted to mention too. I know we've been ragging on it quite a bit. There's a lot of kind of obvious negative things to pick out from this, but there's a lot that I did love, and I think like overall I walked away with a good feeling from the movie. I did enjoy it, and I think if I watch it a second time, I'd probably like it even more. But I gotta say, my favorite scene in the whole movie is the scene with the little boy in the Spider-Man costume. I think that, first off, that's like the bravest kid ever. But I don't think that it was included just for fun. And I think the scene like shows really what a hero can mean to kids. And I was really happy that they left that in there. It was an important scene. Just shows like how much influence a hero can have on kids and how much they try to mimic someone that they look up to, and kind of where they get their values and stuff like that. And it's kind of like the essence of comics and the message of hope and bravery and doing the right thing that, as comic readers, like we all kind of grew up with. And I thought actually that scene was the best in the whole movie because of that. It really drove that point home. I've never really seen him do that too much in another comic book movie. I know there was a scene in Iron Man where the kid was wearing an Iron Man mask, but I thought this was done even better. What did you guys think of that scene?
Greg, what did you think?
I thought it was better than Iron Man, but I think Iron Man was using it more of as a joke, whereas Spider-Man was using it more as an emotional vehicle. Yeah, I just kind of thought it was weird that the cops were like, just stay away, and nobody's doing a damn thing with this kid.
Yeah, nobody
out
went
there.
to grab the kid.
Yeah.
But I did feel like there was a purpose behind that scene, and I kind of could appreciate that. And
it
why
made
they
Rhino
did that.
seem like much more of a dick.
I know, it's like this kid, I'm just going to keep shooting. But
I did like it. I do think like the one through line through like every Spider-Man movie, there's always that one moment where it's like representing what Spider-Man means to New York City within the movie, the world of the movie, and then as a whole to people. Like you think about the first Spider-Man movie, the Raimi version, where you have like people throwing rocks, the Green Goblin, the Spider-Man 2 with them like holding him after he exhausts his energy after the train. Last movie where they have that crane sequence, and then this one, I would say I think it's much better than like the crane sequence. I think it, for one, it makes more sense. And I didn't even realize it at first, but that was the kid that he kind of helped out with like the science project.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I completely didn't realize that. So it added a little bit to it, because like, oh, you kind of see why he idolizes him even more because of that moment. Like if you were a kid and that really happened, I think you can understand why he would do that and why he would idolize him so much. So yeah, I think it was a good representation. I just wish we got that Rhino fight that ended at.
Oh, I know. I was very disappointed in that.
Yeah.
It's funny, like you said too, like they show it in the trailers and it was literally the last scene and that's where they ended. And I'm like, what the hell? I really want to see that fight.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say they're going to pick up in the middle for the third movie, but I don't think that they're going to.
Yeah, I'm sure the Rhino is going to come back in some form. What did you guys?
Better than that costume.
Oh my god, yeah,
yeah.
The Zord costume from like Lord Zed, like what?
Needs a little Z on top of the Rhino horn.
Yeah, and having guns on it was kind of weird too, and shooting missiles and stuff. But could either of you guys understand anything Paul Giamatti was saying?
No, I just something about kid, and I heard, it was
really jumbled, and I just could not understand it at all.
But yeah.
My friend the Sandman said this would be a good movie for me to take.
I will say too, this is something that maybe we haven't really touched on yet, but it's been 2 movies so far in this franchise, and they still have not addressed, as far as actual on-screen presence, they have not addressed J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah.
They kind of hinted at it.
They mention him where you see this kind of email title, which was fun, but I really think he's an important character of the story, and I would love to see them bring him into the fold.
Yeah, I'd be okay too if they got J.K. Simmons back. I don't care if he's from the other version. I just don't think you can do better than J.K. Simmons.
Absolutely, if they could get him away from farmers. But she's hilarious on those too.
Yeah. Well, he had some show going on where he played like a blind guy, but I think it's getting canceled. So hey,
that Jameson character, I think it would add so much more depth and like another layer to the movie. I think that would be great.
Yeah, and I've too been ragging on it a lot, and there were, like I said, there like the human side of it for the most part I did like, and especially there's a really great scene between Aunt May and Peter Parker where she's kind of where he's trying to ask about his father. Like you see it affects her, and she talks about, well, why is he doing this? Because he's really, that you're my son. I thought that moment worked, and it was something that they didn't really explore in the last Raimiverse. And I thought Sally Field was really good, and it really showed that like a relationship between Aunt May and Peter Parker a little bit more in depth than the last film.
Yeah, I agree. They didn't just use her as like the damsel in distress kind of like they did in the Sam Raimi movies. But by the way, in this version, Aunt May totally knows he's Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
Greg and I were talking
even
about
in
that
the first
movie.
one, she knows. Like there was a moment where she did something. I'm like, oh, she knows.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking in my mind, okay, well, she knows, so she's the next person to die. Like, that's the way it always goes, in the next movie, maybe they'll kill her off. But...
Yeah.
Well, that little kid in the first movie is dead after he took off the mask.
Yeah, I know. But I just hope they don't have Aunt May marry Dr. Octopus like they did in the comics.
Yeah. Once she walks in, you see her look up and see the light swinging. I think that's kind of a hint. And then Spider-Man happens to stop being Spider-Man for 5 months after Gwen Stacy dies, and then
just the look she gives him too. Sally Field does a great job with those little looks, or you could tell.
Yeah, and how he didn't want her to wash the laundry and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I also I should mention like how it portrayed the after death of Gwen Stacy, and you just see him at the grave for like 5 months as the seasons go. It's kind of a cliche, but I thought it was so effective.
Yeah, it was a kind of a variation on a theme. It was well done.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I feel bad that we're losing Gwen Stacy because I thought Emma Stone did a job. It's kind of her prototypical character of very cute girl, but's got a little bit of an attitude and can fire shots right back at you, which is always fun with her.
Yeah, I know they had, like, Shailene Woodley was cast as Mary Jane, and they had scenes with her, and I guess they took him out, which I think was a smart move because I think that would kind of...
the chick from, what was that movie that I watched? Divergent?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I don't want... She wouldn't make a good Mary Jane.
No, I think Emma Watson, when they first cast Emma Watson, I'm like, she's a perfect Mary Jane. Gwen Stacy. Like, Jesus. It's funny because she's a natural redhead, and she's playing Gwen Stacy, and then you have Kirsten Dunst, who's naturally blonde, who played Mary Jane. So I guess they just like to make things difficult on the hair people. So...
But yeah, I totally agree, Greg. That's a huge asset to the movie. That's one of the major strong points of these movies, and now they've lost that. So
yeah. Plus the girls behind us were all into that. Like, oh, he's so sweet. He spelled "I love you" on the bridge, and the whole time I'm like, God, there's if a guy's trying to be this romantic to you, you're gonna think he's creepy, or just be like, fuck it, screw this guy, I give up on him. Like.
You also think, like, that may not be the smartest thing in the world if you're trying to be, have a secret identity, is to put "I love you" and then go to the top of that bridge and have your mask off. People do have high-powered cameras. It's like...
That's very true.
Plus, with her her getting followed by him after they break up for that little bit.
Yeah.
Like, he follows her around, and they kind of cover that he was following her around, like he says that to her. And in my head, I'm going... Dude, any other girl would be like, get the fuck away from me. You are goddamn creepy. Girls behind me are going, aww. And then after about 5 or 10 minutes, I hear one of them go, that would be kind of creepy, though, a little bit. I'm like...
It's okay, though, because he's a superhero.
It puts a new spin on the whole, like, web stalking type of stuff, so...
But yeah, I think it would be interesting, like, as they move forward here, like, into the third movie, like, who's going to take up that mantle that Emma Stone had as Gwen Stacy? Like, is the person they're going to get for Mary Jane going to be good enough? Is she going to be on par, like, to make a good counterpart for Andrew Garfield on screen? Like, because I think he's a great actor, like Dan said, on his own, but he needs that other actress to go along with him to really carry the movie. So hopefully they can...
It's just going to be Aunt May the rest of the next movie.
Did you guys,
yes, marrying Doc Ock.
What, do you guys know? I guess they are a real life couple.
Yes, I knew that.
I did hear that. I think, yeah.
I'm up on my gossip, y'all.
that could explain the good chemistry.
Yeah. I guess that works. So I guess Andrew Garfield just has to go out with the next person that he has on screen, and maybe that will work. I wonder if they will like have a love interest. I could see them like introducing a Mary Jane character, but not really like pushing, maybe waiting for that to become more than that. I don't know.
Maybe Aunt May saying, there's the girl next door, I want you to meet her and everything, and start setting up that way, and then maybe at the end of the movie, she's at the door and you just hit the jackpot, Tiger.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll
pretty sweet setup.
Maybe they'll kind of start bringing like the Daily Bugle and Jameson into it more. Maybe they'll have like something going on with like him and Betty Brant or something.
Well, they did mention one character briefly, that Felicia Hardy. Well, assuming it's Felicia.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I just said Felicia.
Yeah, they didn't say her full name, but I don't know if that's just just to save themselves, just in case they can't get that actress later on. I guess they could also go down that route as well. So
yeah, that could be cool too.
That would, I mean, Black Cat would be kind of a cool a cool way to go, because that's not something they've done yet, and it would fit into their motif of like having characters related to some sort of animal with Electro and electric eels and all that stuff. So
she's gonna get bit by electrified cats.
Yeah.
That have been radioactively charged or something.
Yeah. Doesn't she take like the super soldier serum or whatever? Is that, I don't remember, but
I think it was like a watered down version of it or something like that.
Yeah.
She just looks good in a suit. That's all we're going for with her character.
True. All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we take a break?
No, I think that's about all I had.
All right. So those are our thoughts on Amazing Spider-Man 2. And like Chunk and I mentioned, my review at geekcastradio.com is also on the site. Feel free to read that and disagree with me, like apparently most people have. No problem. I'm fine with it. Anyways, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about comedic icons and who would make up the Mount Rushmore of comedy. So we will see you in a bit.
It's been 5 years, and the Geekcast Radio Network would like to give back to you. How, you may ask? Well, first of all, we're coming up with a brand new website to be launched June 1st, 2014. In addition to that, there'll be many new features for interactive abilities. So how do you enter into this magical celebration? Well, Geekcast Radio has a contest where you can win some awesome prizes, ranging from comics, Blu-rays, DVDs, trade paperbacks, and comics, and more. How do you enter? Write in your favorite stories of how the Geekcast Radio Network has affected you in the last 5 years, and how it's unleashed the geek in you. You can also enter by writing reviews on our shows on iTunes. For more information, visit www.geekcastradio.com and click on the banner. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.
Every week on the In Session Film Podcast, you can expect to hear reviews on all of the latest movies, big films, small films, and everything in between. We'll also do top 3 segments relating back to our main review. We discuss all of the latest movie news and rumblings, as well as have movie series and other fun segments. And we always talk about the films that we're watching and why you should watch them or not watch them as well. If you want to learn more about the In Session Film Podcast, check us out online at InSessionFilm.com. You can hear our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, and so much more. In fact, you can listen to everything we have straight from our website. Again, that is InSessionFilm.com. Download our podcast, check us out, and come join us every week. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at comedic icons and try to determine if there was a Mount Rushmore of comedy, who would be on that Mount Rushmore. And people have kind of had these conversations a lot about different topics. You hear about it with sports or those different things. And the way we're looking at it is, if, say, like an alien came down, doesn't know anything about Earth, and asks, I want to understand comedy, what 4 people would you give them to understand comedy as a whole? And we're thinking general comedy, not just stand-up comics, not just movie comics, not just people on television. We're thinking people as a whole. What faces represent comedy, I would say, within the last 100 or so years, I guess, give or take. So we'll try to figure that out. And then you can let us know if we got it right or wrong, of course, because it's the internet and people like to share their opinions. So I guess maybe I'll kick this off, and what we'll do is we'll throw out names and we'll kind of discuss if we think they should belong on that Mount Rushmore. Think about it. It's only 4 people, which is not that much when you consider how much comedy entails, but we'll try to narrow it down. And I think we'll start with an easy one, and it's one I think might be an automatic yes for a lot of us. And that's because it's a person who I think has represented modern day comedy. And by modern day, I say from 1980 till today. He's a person that's been in movies. He's been in stand-up. He's been on sketch shows. I think universally, if you don't think this person is funny, it's on you. And it's a person that I think that has done all sorts of comedy from slapstick to more subtle and is still funny as a person in general. And that is Bill Murray.
Damn it. So going to mention Bill Murray.
Yeah, I definitely had Bill Murray up there.
And that's why I'm starting with him, because I figure if you ask some people, like, who is the funniest person alive right now, I think out of 100 people, half of those would probably go to someone like Bill Murray. Maybe not as much today because he's not as big of a name, but, you know, think about the movies, Groundhog Day, Stripes, Ghostbusters. He's just a funny person in general. There's all these infamous stories about him. There's this one where he goes up to someone in McDonald's, steals a fry off their plate, eats it, and says, "No one will ever believe you," and then walks away. I'm like,
that's hard to top that.
That's pretty badass. I think a lot of comics have tried to bend like Bill Murray, but there's no one quite like him. He can take any line and make it funny. Like, even if the line reading it off the page isn't funny, he makes it funny. And like I said, he was on SNL. He has some of the best comedy movies of all time, like a number of them. So I just think if you're going to talk comedy, it begins and ends with someone like Bill Murray.
Yeah, I mean, just the body of work he had, like you mentioned, some of his movies. And the ironic thing is he was in a movie titled Rushmore. So I think just because of that, we have to put him on here. The other thing, too, about him is, I don't know if a lot of people have heard this, but he's, like, terrific at improv. And a lot of his movie lines are completely improvised. Like, I know a lot of them on, like, Caddyshack, the directors and stuff said they would just leave the camera, keep rolling on him, and he would just go off saying stuff. And a lot of it they kept in the movie because it was just freaking hilarious, and it was right off the top of his head. And it's one thing to take stuff off a script and convey it in a funny way, but it's something else to just be in that situation and come up with new funny stuff off the top of your head and just make the entire crew just crack up in laughter. But yeah, really, really impressive comedian and actor.
Greg, what do you think? Do you think he belongs on the Mount Rushmore of comedy?
I think we should just get out the dynamite and chisels. There'd be a lot of work on his face, though. He's a little pockmarked, but yeah, he's definitely like a comedian that I grew up with, and it's kind of the first person that came to mind for me when we decided that this is what we were gonna do this entire week. Also, by the way, whenever you say that alien thing, where like an alien came to Earth and who we would just show, I always think about Superman, because I have a feeling he has no idea. Like, I don't think he knows what funny is.
Yeah, I don't think they have a lot of stand-up comedians on Krypton.
No. Maybe that's
come across that way.
Maybe that was the issue. Maybe that was Zod's problem. He just didn't have any comedy. So we're starting off fresh with a Bill Murray. I think that, you know, it's like starting a sports Mount Rushmore with Michael Jordan. It's like it's an obvious choice. So did somebody else have a name they wanted to kind of throw out and see if we also agree that if they belong in Mount Rushmore?
I guess I had one. I think this is kind of an easy one too. I'm hoping anyway, because I think his body of work is just as impressive. And he's someone that's been in a lot of different genres. He's done a lot of stand-up work, a lot of movies, a lot of TV. He was on SNL for a long time. And that is none other than Eddie Murphy.
See, I thought about him. I do see where you're going. I mean, in the 1980s, he had the Beverly Hills Cop movies. You have Eddie Murphy, Raw.
Coming to America.
Yeah, I'm a little more.
Those are my two favorites, Chuck.
Yeah, they were funny stuff.
I'm a little more hesitant on Eddie Murphy, just because you think about it, like almost like his last 20 years. Or since, like, you know, the 2000s, has done everything possible to kind of do away with everything he did prior, with movies like Norbert and, you know, just like Meet Dave, just a lot of not really great movies. Unlike someone like Bill Murray, I feel like he has something coming out that's generally good every so often. I do think he's certainly in the discussion. I just don't know if it's a slam dunk like a Bill Murray. I don't know. Greg, what do you think?
There's so many people to choose from, and he's just been shitting in a bucket lately. It's
We need to make that a t-shirt.
Well, I just put a giant bucket on a t-shirt, a giant pail.
I think he's expanded his horizons, though. He's done a lot of different things, and he's proved that he can move into like children's comedy and like family comedy. He's done stuff like Dr. Dolittle, and those were pretty popular.
I didn't think those were that great.
Yeah, stuff like his voice work for Shrek.
Yeah, maybe he's a diamond in the rough. I don't know. He's been putting a lot of crap around that diamond though lately.
I mean, his resume, like if you stack up his accomplishments, are certainly there. I just think there's a little bit of things that detract from it as well. Like I guess you could say that about any president or any person that we come up with, but I just think maybe we hold off on him definitely yes for now, and maybe we go back and think and we reassess, because like Eddie Murphy Raw is one of the best stand-up specials ever, but he also kind of get away from that. But like you said, he did expand new territory, and when he came on SNL, I think he did bring in an entire new like life to that show with some of the characters he created, like Gumby and Buckwheat and the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood or whatever he did. He's certainly funny. I'm just thinking like Bill Murray has done similar things that he did, even better. So maybe there's other people that cover different territory.
Yeah, I see what you guys are saying. Like we could hold off. To me, I mean personally, he's more of a slam dunk than Bill Murray to me if I was making a list. But I see what you guys are saying with as far as like not making stuff lately and everything. And there's certainly a lot of other candidates, that could easily take his place. So we could look at some other ones.
I know I kind of stole one of yours already, Greg, but did you have another person in mind at all?
Well, I think I've got a guy that's kind of in the same vein as Bill Murray, but a little bit more wacky crazy, and that guy is Robin Williams. He's kind of gotten a little zany over the past maybe decade or so, but he's come out with some great movies. Mrs. Doubtfire, which apparently they're going to be making a second one at some point. There's some scuttlebutt out there. But he's done some great stuff. I know he's got Jumanji, but it's not a comedic role, so at least he's not doing bad in a comedic role. But he's very quick-witted. He's got like all these weird, nutty voices that he does, and he's in Snickers commercials.
Yes, he has a TV show now too.
The crazy ones. Yeah,
which is not that great. I watched like the first like 4 episodes. I'm like, I can do better. I do like Robin Williams. I do think he's funny. But the funny thing about Robin Williams is I think I prefer him in dramatic roles compared to his comedic roles, like in Dead Poets Society or Good Will Hunting.
What's the one he did with the pictures? That
1 hour photo.
Oh, 1 hour photo. That was creepy.
That was so good.
Yeah, I think he is better. No, I do think he's funny, but I think I find him even more effective in those type of roles than when he's being comedic. I mean, he does like, a mile a minute. I mean, think of something like the genie in Aladdin, like that character was like my childhood. I do think he's a contender. I just wonder if his comedy is he kind of has a certain stick that he goes with. I just wonder, does he really go beyond that enough to really encompass some beyond funny voices, a mile a minute, quick wit? Would you put him against someone who has more components to their comedy, that we could come up with as well? I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah, I mean, for me, he's someone that I had written down to be at the top of my list. I think, like, Dan brings up a good point, like, with him moving into more dramatic roles, like, later in his career. I do like his earlier work, like, he had the TV show Mork and Mindy, very funny on that. And then, like you guys mentioned, Mrs. Doubtfire was probably his biggest hit.
Or Hook. Hook was
yeah, Hook. I don't know. I wouldn't be against putting him on the Mount Rushmore. I think maybe there's some other ones we could kind of break down first, but I definitely wouldn't be against it.
Okay, so we'll put him on the short list for right now. So we got Bill Murray is a pretty definite, and we have Robin Williams as kind of a strong contender. I guess I had one I wanted to bring up. We kind of in a different ballpark from what we've been going with comedians. Well, this guy is technically a comedian, but I'm more thinking of when Mount Rushmore of comedy, someone who has had a huge impact on growing comedy to new audiences, and someone who I think was a household name unlike any other, and a person that people looked at as a person who not only was a comedic legend in its own right, but made comics into stars. And that was Johnny Carson.
Ah, yes.
The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson was, I mean, obviously it was during a time when there was 4 channels and 2 of them were PBS. So, he owned late night television. You think about like the late night explosion that we're getting now, his setup was kind of there was ones that came before him, like Ed Sullivan, but people look at him for stand-up especially. You think of people like Jerry Seinfeld, people like Drew Carey, so many of the big comedians today, though Drew Carey's on Price is Right, so maybe that he's not the best example. But a lot of the big comedians looked at the Tonight Show as their big break. Like after the Tonight Show, they became huge, especially if like he gave them the okay symbol, or if he brought them to the couch to talk to. That was like one of the biggest gifts any comedian could have, was doing that. And maybe Carson himself isn't the most hilarious person in the world. I don't think a lot of his comedy holds up today. But when you look at the impact he had on just comedy as a whole, I do think he belongs. He would belong there just because of what he meant. I don't know what you guys think. Chuck?
Carson's actually somebody that I had a couple mock Rushmores that I was making up, and I had him on a couple of them. Like you said, so many guys got their big break on that show. And you look at even other hosts of late shows and Tonight Shows, like David Letterman and Jay Leno, appeared on the Johnny Carson show. Eddie Murphy and Rodney Dangerfield and so many guys, like, that was how they were introduced to America. And like you said, Dan, maybe Carson wasn't the best at standing up there and doing some stand-up routines, but just the way he brought people in, interviewed them, and showed off their best qualities to America. I think he's got to be in the discussion. I think he's got my vote, honestly.
Greg, what do you think?
I think he's the best when he's got those animals on his desk. Those I didn't get to see much of him because he's a little bit. I was a little too young to stay up that late and actually watch.
And by animals, you don't mean his like wives, right? You mean actual animals?
His wives?
He had like 5 wives.
I don't mean his wives. Yeah, there's actually a really good doc on Netflix about him. I highly recommend people watch. But yeah, I kind of agree with Chuck that maybe the jokes maybe don't hold up, but for back in the day, he was definitely a good example of comedy. And my dad always used to talk him up, and like anytime they mention Jay Leno or Letterman, or and they were trying to make comparisons between Jimmy Fallon and him, and my dad was always like, nobody can touch him, nobody. My dad does not talk like that, by the way.
That's what
not at all.
That's what the other dad talks like, right?
Yeah, that's the other dad. To get me out of this fucking date, Dad.
It's a long title.
You should advertise that or something. It's like Greg Beppler, aka possibly your father, if you need me to be.
That would be terribly. That would be horrible if I'm trying to hook up with a girl afterwards. Who's your daddy? Well, you are sort of. I'm not sure who I'm supposed to call if this goes wrong, but can't call you to help out anymore.
Do you yell at yourself when you get caught then, and then run out the window?
Okay, so we'll put Johnny Carson as a very strong contender right now. So who else do we think belongs in this discussion?
Well, I think you have to consider somebody who's got the comedy world abuzz in the present time, and I think everybody's talking about
Carrot Top.
Well, he's got the same kind of color hair going on. I'm talking about Louis C.K. Anytime you go, like, you hear discussions amongst comedians, they always say how Louis C.K. is freaking hilarious, and he's changing the game not only with his comedy, but he's changing how business gets done in the comedy world. He's doing these things where he's trying to make it where he can get people in the seats who maybe don't have as much money. They don't have to spend as much, but he's still making a good profit. He's cutting out the middleman. But on top of that, the man is freaking hilarious. He's got 2 comedy specials on Netflix. I've watched both. He's got this great joke where he talks about his girls and him having to go to the bathroom, and like he can't really go after them because he's shitting in a bucket. And
He stole our joke.
Oh my God. When I heard that, my stomach hurt so much after that. And his comedy stuff is just kind of like one joke right after the other. He's got some really great modern scenarios of like guys in front of him in a coffee shop, calling stuff like awesome, and how that word is way overused. Like,
you hear that, Chris Hardwick?
I don't think it was exactly awesome. It may have been some other word, but he's so solid, and he's got his own TV show that has been critically acclaimed, and he's popping up in other TV shows. So I think Louis C.K. is getting pretty far up a mountain, if not the mountain.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He belongs in discussion a big amount. I mean, he is the top comic today. There's no doubt about that. And you do make a great point of how he's kind of redefining and how he's kind of leading comedy in a lot of ways with this TV show. That's all him. He creates all of it. Basically, FX gives him money and they say, go do your thing. And then he makes this TV show. And I think you see a lot of people doing that now too in Comedy Central. They kind of follow that similar pattern. A lot of comics are getting like that same kind of treatment. And then he also, with his specials, he changed the game and how they distribute that, not just through HBO or Comedy Central, but putting it online for $5, eliminating the middleman, and being able to really get like digital distribution like no one else did at that moment. And then after that, you had people with similar backgrounds do the same thing, like Jim Gaffigan kind of followed suit, and other big comedians looked at that thinking, hey, I can get more money this way, I can get my name out there quicker, and I can do what I want, and I don't have to worry about censors or anything like that. So I do strongly believe he belongs in the discussion. And I don't know if he'll make the finalist, but like you mentioned, Greg, people talking about adding Reagan on to Mount Rushmore as a new president. Like that'd be like the person we would also add. So I definitely put him on the short list for right now. Chuck, what do you think?
I'm really gonna piss Greg off with this, but
I'm gonna guess you're not familiar with Louis C.K.
No, I'm very familiar. I just don't like the guy at all. I think a lot of his jokes are duds, and I just don't see it. Like I just don't get his comedy. I guess I've watched his show, I've watched some of his stand-up, and it just doesn't grab me like some of the other stand-ups do. Like I guess maybe I just don't get it. But I mean, he's definitely changing the game, like you guys mentioned, and that's definitely worth some accolades and stuff like that. I'm just saying, like on a personal level, as me, not really a big fan of the guy and his comedy and stuff.
Yeah, well, tweets there. I mean, that's the thing with comedy. So what's the word I'm looking
for?
Subjective, yeah. I mean, I personally love Louis C.K., but I could see, like, my wife's not the biggest fan either because of some of his jokes. I'm like, well, see, he's being ironic, and then it's like, no. So, but I can understand where you're coming from, Chuck. But we'll put him on the short list for now, but obviously not a definite. We have one definite so far, but we have a few people on the short list. Who else belongs in this discussion?
I would like to make a case for someone, and it's someone that has a very specific, I guess, subgenre of comedy. So maybe the deck is stacked against them kind of a little bit there because they're not multi-talented. But this is someone that's an impersonator, and everyone loves impersonators. It's some of the funniest stuff out there when you can hear someone do like an impersonation that is just dead on. It's one of the funniest things, and I think this guy is probably the greatest of all time, and that is Rich Little. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him at all.
Yeah, he was on a lot of those not Dane Cook roasts.
Dean Martin roasts.
Yeah, Dean Martin roast back in the day.
Yeah, and this is a guy that could do over 200 impressions, and some of his more notable ones were really, really dead on. I mean, his Jimmy Stewart was like exactly Jimmy Stewart. And then he also did some true impersonation stuff where you actually dress up as the person and all your mannerisms mimic the person. He actually did a song, a Johnny Cash song in Johnny Cash's voice, and it's uncanny. Like, you actually think it's Johnny Cash singing. I mean, he did a lot of presidents. He did Nixon and Clinton, Kennedy. He did like Bing Crosby. His Bing Crosby sounds so good. Just so many impressions this guy could do, and I think it was so impressive. And he had a very long career too, in a lot of different things. So personally, I would like to make a case for him just because it's an area of comedy that everyone loves, but kind of gets overlooked in discussions like this. Maybe, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's a very talented impressionist, and I think a lot of people were influenced by the way he did things. And if you look at impressionists today, a lot of like what they do is kind of modeled after him for sure. My only hesitation about putting him on it is the fact that when you think of like the Mount Rushmore of comedy, I think it has to be a name that you say and nearly everyone knows or has an understanding of who that person is. And I think that like I know who he is. I know a lot of people do, but I just wonder if so much time has passed that he doesn't obviously get the respect he deserves. So does that kind of hurt him being on there? Like, he doesn't have that iconic look, or people may not even know his name. They know some of his comedy. He's certainly funny. I just don't know if he has that legendary status that he clearly deserves, but he just, for whatever reason, his name hasn't kind of continued like a Johnny Carson or some other older comedian. So that's my only hesitation.
I would definitely agree with that. I thought the guy was too good not to mention. I thought he deserved at least a little poke in there. But I agree that there's not a lot of people that know who he is actually.
Yeah. Greg, do you agree, or what are you thinking there?
Well, I've heard the name before. I've never really listened to his stuff, so that kind of backs up your point, Dan.
Yeah.
But and then there's the other thing, like Chuck said, of that he's just kind of in that subgenre, which kind of stacks against him. And I find impersonations amusing, but it also has to have that content with it to make it funny. Like, Chuck does a lot of impersonations. They're funny because because of the scenario where he'll use the voice where it fits, or the line of that person fits in to that scenario. So that makes it funny. And since I don't know the man or have heard of any of his stuff, I don't know how good his impersonations are, but since Chuck's saying that he's good, and I know Chuck is a stickler for impersonations and such, I'll believe him on that, but I don't know the content behind it, so I can't really say whether he should be included or not.
Yeah, I definitely get that. Like I said, I wanted to mention the guy,
Yeah.
and even to get his name out there, and I recommend you guys checking out some of his stuff, especially Greg, and then anyone else that has never seen his stuff. But I have a very tuned ear to like voices and stuff like that, and this guy, there's some of them that are some of his impressions are just okay, but there's a lot of them that are like dead nuts on, and I just wanted to mention him for fun, for the heck of it.
And you know what? Hopefully some people hearing this will not go out and check his stuff, because it is quite impressive. The guy was like the go-to for impressions for such a long time. I feel like that's like one category that you have in comedy is like, who's the guy who does impressions? Like right now, probably like Frank Caliendo is one of the most popular ones, and Richard Little had that crown for such a long time. But I guess that's the bad thing about doing impressions too. You're doing impressions of people within the moment. So once those people kind of go away, that kind of goes away with it. Like, yeah, we find John Madden funny, but 10 years from now, well, I guess only people will be like, why is that guy doing an impression of a video game? So,
yeah. And one quick thing I want to mention too is, and this person actually might come up later on too, but I guess when Richard Pryor did some of his movies and some of his on-screen work, they would actually bring in Rich Little to dub over his curse words and stuff like that with more suitable words for television. And Rich Little would do a dead-on Richard Pryor, and they actually used him to record over some of the bad words.
That's pretty funny. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I wonder how many other people they brought him in for.
I don't know.
One person I did want to bring up, because one person we haven't really talked about, a lady comic, a woman comic, and I unfortunately I think a lot of those people get unfairly ignored, because I think there are a lot of really funny women out there that aren't just Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. And one, like, we talked about like having an iconic name. The person I'm thinking of is Lucille Ball. I Love Lucy was one of the biggest, and still is one of the biggest shows of all time. She's a knack for physical comedy, which is hard to do right. People, like, a lot of people try to do what she does. Like, I mean, that show has been parodied so much. People even today, I think if you say Lucille Ball, they'll know who she is. She has that huge red hair, the voice, and I don't know, maybe she belongs on here, but you think of like women comics who have kind of, made a name for themselves, and she made a name for herself when there were very few women in comedy at all. So I do think like she needs to be mentioned along with like other women comedians. I don't know what you guys think of her. I mean people maybe not love her show, but I know back in the day it was like, one of the biggest shows of all time.
All I know her from is the Lucille Ball show, and I really didn't. I may get blasted for this. I'm not a huge fan of the show. Like, it's definitely a comedy for that time and everything. But when I do think of comedy, and I do think of female comedians, I do kind of go towards her a lot. I'm not really a big fan of her brand of humor. I do enjoy slapstick though, but I don't know. It's there's something there that I don't care for that much. I'll watch the show and everything if it's on, but if there's other stuff on, I'll definitely change the channel. But I do think of her when I think of a female comedian, so I guess I'm kind of conflicted on that one.
Chuck, what do you think?
I do like Lucille Ball a lot for this discussion. I think she's someone that, I guess you could say, not really started it, but kind of in a way did really help to propel TV comedy and physical comedy back in the day when she started, like, what was it, around the 50s and 60s. She was in a couple of other movies too, mostly TV, but I think when you look at comedic women, she's right there at the top of the list and definitely worthy of this discussion. I could go either way on her. I could definitely include her in Mount Rushmore, but I'd also like to point to another female comedian that had a huge impact on comedy, and that's Carol Burnett.
Ooh, that's a good choice.
Yeah, and I think I look at her as kind of the female version of Johnny Carson. The variety show that she had was kind of a sketch comedy thing that she did with Harvey Korman and Tim Conway and a couple other ones. That show, like, gave a lot of people their start. That's kind of where the show Mama's Family spawned off of, and I think she was very, very creative, comedic mind, and I think she deserves to be mentioned right up there with Lucille Ball. So that's kind of a toss-up for me. I would like to include one of them. Either one I could probably go with. Maybe the more influential. You could go with either one, though, really. I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough. I guess in a way it's almost a little bit unfair since Lucille Ball came a little earlier than Carol Burnett, but I'm not super familiar with her show. I never really watched it. It was certainly before our time, but you do know her name, and her variety show was huge, and that was like the time of the variety shows, but it still had staying power because you mentioned it had like a sitcom after that. So she has, multiple roles within TV, and I would probably lean towards Lucille Ball just because if you're talking about just again, thinking about more how Mount Rushmore is kind of like that wide range of people, I would assume that more people would be influenced by her than Carol Burnett, but maybe not. I could be wrong. And maybe today it's more Carol Burnett because more people probably have grown up with her. So I don't know. Greg, what are you thinking on this?
I've never really watched anything with Carol Burnett in it. I'm not holding up my end of the comedy mountain here, not knowing most of the people that you guys are spitting out, but I really haven't watched any Carol Burnett stuff.
I really haven't either. I just really know her from, honestly, just from other comedians talking about her. So it's more like third hand stuff. So you're not really alone there.
I don't know enough to talk. Sorry.
I have seen
That's never stopped anyone in the internet ever. So.
Exactly. I've seen her show. I've seen quite a few episodes. My parents had some like old VHS tapes that we would watch and stuff. And I will say she was very funny. And I think surprisingly, her comedy does hold up today really, really well. And she was multi-talented. She was a great singer too. And on her show, they would do a lot of musical numbers and stuff like that, similar to the kind of stuff that Seth MacFarlane throws in on Family Guy, where there's a breakout into song. I guess you could say maybe even started that. Like on her show, they would do like tons of musical numbers, and they would be funny. It would all be mixed into one thing. So I mean, she had a big influence.
Yeah, so let's hold off on maybe. Well, those are kind of too big ifs as well. We'll maybe see how that goes. Greg, what are there other people that you are thinking of maybe that we can bring into discussion as well?
I have a feeling I have somebody else, but I have a feeling they won't make it on. I don't know why. I just don't feel like they'll make it on. But it's a comedian from my childhood and kind of really put a big impression on me. And kind of made me into the goofy kid that I was, but I really enjoy, maybe not so much now because I'm a little bit more grown up, but I still think he does a great job in movies, and that's Jim Carrey. His Ace Ventura, I love that one. I was freaking walking around going, "Oh, righty then," doing that kind of stuff, and the talking butt and stuff like that. When I was younger, I just thought that was great. The way he freaking moves his face is made of rubber. One of my all-time favorite things was Ace Ventura 2, where he's going out to spy on somebody out in the Sahara.
Yeah, I know.
And he's in that rhino, and it gets really hot. He can't open the door. He sheds off all of his clothes. He's sweating profusely, or it's just hilarious. Disgusting.
Yeah.
And he can't get out. And finally sees this little light, and he's like, "Oh, it's a way to escape." And he looks back, and he jumps. He's like trying to climb his way through this hole, and then a safari tour comes through, and they're like, "Oh, it's a rhino," and it's the rhino that Jim Carrey's in, spying on people. And up, the rhino is giving birth, and Jim Carrey's head is freaking popping out of this thing, making all these weird faces. Yeah. His sweat is just acting like just stuff coming out of the rhino. That one's like etched into my memory. That's that's putting a smile on my face right now, and I should probably think of that more often if I'm in a shitty mood, because that'll put a smile right on my face.
Yeah, I mean, I do love, like, similar to you, we grew up in the same era, so Jim Carrey was huge. I remember seeing him first in Living Color, and like loving like Fireman Bob, and I mean, he was like obviously the only white guy on that show, but I do find him really funny. The Mask, I do like a lot. Like you mentioned, he's really good at impressions as well. He has some good Elvis and different things too, and he's kind of crazy. But I guess my only hesitation is he's kind of gone away from. I guess he's coming back because he's doing Dumb and Dumber 2. Which is Dumb and Dumber, the first one is one of my favorite comedies of all time. But I guess my only hesitation would be that he hasn't really done a lot of comedy. He's kind of like moved himself away from it. I mean, he did do Kick-Ass 2 last year, but I feel like he's trying to become, similar to like Robin Williams, he's trying to become more of a serious actor with things like, Eternal Sunshine and The Majestic.
Truman Show,
which is a really good movie. Yeah, I mean, I do think he's really funny. I think he belongs in the discussion. Like, he was like the king of comedy in the 90s. I mean, Ace Ventura movie made like $1 trillion. So certainly his influence is there.
And we know Chuck's going to go for it because he was in that movie with Dan Marino. Chuck loves Dan Marino. Instant vote. I'm kidding.
That is true. I do like a lot of Jim Carrey stuff. Like you guys mentioned, Dan mentioned Dumb and Dumber. That's hilarious. That movie's just hilarious. And the sequel did not do it justice with the different actors. But yeah, that and Ace Ventura. And you mentioned his impressions. He actually is a very established impressionist, and he does a killer Clint Eastwood. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Greg. I know you would appreciate that.
Yeah, I have.
That just cracks me up because it's a good Clint Eastwood, but it's a funny Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, it's almost like a caricature of Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, exactly. That's the perfect description. Like he does Clint Eastwood, but he does him in such a funny way. Like I do respect that a lot. He's kind of getting away from the comedy a little bit, like Dan said. So I guess I'm kind of along those same lines as Dan. He definitely deserves to be mentioned. He's done that much. He's definitely in the discussion. Would he make it on? I don't know. You know, it's close. It's a close call. He's definitely in consideration, though.
One person I think that might be one that I think might be a definite yes. I don't know. We'll see. You never know. We talked about like people. We a lot of comedians, and one person I'm thinking who has a lot of influence about slapstick, and he person who can do it right. A guy who's talking about funny movies, has done some of the most funny movies of all time, and made them, and that is of course Mel Brooks. I think you think it's stuff like Young Frankenstein to Spaceballs to Blazing Saddles. He's made some of the greatest comedies of all time. I mean, he kind of retired after Dracula Dead and Loving It. But if you look at his body of work, I mean, The Producers, which became one of the biggest Broadway hits of all time, one of his films. I do think that he is certainly a comedic voice that has had a lot of influence on comedic movies. Think of things like Airplane and Naked Gun. A lot of his style kind of bleeds into those. So.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know what you guys, if you think he belongs or if he's a maybe or what. But
Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I love Mel Brooks. A lot of my favorite comedies are Mel Brooks. Robin Hood and Men in Tights is one that I really enjoyed. It's probably one of his lesser ones, but for that to be one of his lesser ones, that's pretty freaking powerful. And I've always got we're men, manly men, we're men in tights, tights. That song's kind of stuck in my head right now. I forgot about him, Dan, but as soon as you mentioned him, I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you, Greg? Why the hell did Mel Brooks? Of course, he's great, and his offspring is even awesome with the zombie survival guide and stuff.
That's power right there to make an offspring, and he's very funny. He's very good.
He's got very good genes.
Yeah, I would agree. I did have him on my list, and he's definitely right there in consideration. To me, my favorite of his movies was History of the World Part 1. And I mean, even the title, the fact that they didn't make a Part 2. But, everything in that movie is hilarious. I'm in love with that movie. And like Dan made a great point. Like his influence is clearly seen in stuff like Naked Gun and Airplane. And Airplane is also one of my favorite comedies of all time. So that's like a big genre, like that slapstick sort of comedy, and it's something that he had a huge influence on. Maybe you could even call him like the grandfather of that kind of, well, maybe with the exception of the Three Stooges, but
yeah, or you can even go back early to like Charlie Chaplin, but
yeah,
it's certainly
maybe not the grandfather, maybe like the uncle, the crazy uncle.
He's a fun uncle that everyone loves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I figured he'd be one because that's the thing too. I think everyone has a favorite Mel Brooks movie, and like there's always one you can pick. You know, everyone has a different. A lot of people love Young Frankenstein. A lot of people love Spaceballs. There are certain actors or certain comedians or directors that like there's a go-to, like, okay, that's everyone's favorite. But with him, it can really be anything. So, and he's a guy who can kind of have a similar style, but it doesn't get repetitive. He's not doing the same joke over and over again. He can do really, really smart comedy but really, really dumb comedy, but in a smart way. Like, you know, having a scene of a bunch of cowboys farting around a fire. And it's funny because it works. So and then he'll have a really good, like, breaking the third wall at the end of that movie. So it's really...
It's going to be the king.
Give the governor a harumph.
Yeah, so I think he's definitely... he is a definite, for sure.
Hey, Oedipus.
What's up, mother... Anyway. Who else are we thinking? I mean, we kind of mentioned a few people. Maybe we should bring them up again. And you mentioned him, Chuck, and that's Richard Pryor. Like, I'll admit, like, I've seen like bits and pieces of Richard Pryor. I've never sat through like an entire comedy special, but I do know that when you see best comics of all time, his name is usually, if not on the top, usually 1, 2, or 3. So feel like he obviously needs to be in this discussion for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll admit I'm not super familiar with his stuff. I know it was way before my time, but I've seen a lot of other people that were before my time, but I never really checked him out. I'm thinking like he's someone that kind of influenced Eddie Murphy and stuff like that. I get that impression. I will say his appearance in the Superman movie, that was pretty freaking hilarious, but not in a good way.
Yeah, that is the one thing like he was never able to do. Like he never really he could never transition to movies. I think and a large part because he was such a raw, like dirty comic that they try to make him more family friendly, and I just don't think it worked. You know, thinking of like I can't think of that movie where he basically is sold to some rich kid, or it's some movies with Gene Wilder. But
oh yeah, the toy.
Yeah. And it's funny because you talked about him being on Superman. You know how he got that part was because he was like on going back to like Johnny Carson. He was on Johnny Carson and he did like this whole like monologue about Superman and why he loves him and like all these different things. And then the people who made Superman saw that and like, oh, he needs to be in the movie. So that going back to Birds we mentioned that's how he was in Superman 3. But Greg, I'm curious to hear what you think about putting Pryor on this.
Yeah, I haven't really watched a lot of his stuff. I did watch The Toy. I thought it was a good movie. It wasn't really anything outstanding to me comedy-wise or anything like that. I know he's influenced a lot of comedians. I know like Chris Rock was influenced by him or any black comedian. I don't think I've really watched much of his stuff to really... I'm really killing this episode. Sorry.
Well, no, like we all haven't either.
He's such an influence to other comedians, but we were too young at the time, and we just haven't gotten around to watching that much stuff with him.
I feel like he wasn't able to make the jump to the screen, like Dan said. And I mean, while he's in the discussion, if this was a Mount Rushmore of stand-ups, I'm pretty sure he would definitely be on it. But as far as like him like staying in that sort of subgenre and not being able to make the jump to other things, that's what would make me hesitate in putting him in this list.
Yeah. I feel like we're doing it. It's a little bit unfair because we're doing it on reputation only, so we're seeing him through a funnel. So probably if we were more familiar with his work, he probably would be a no-show. But it's a little harder when you aren't, and people will probably scream and yell at us. But hey, he can't know everything, no matter how hard we try. I'll just throw some other ones out here. And then you talk about Richard Pryor, and then you think of like a dirty comic, his drug issues and stuff like that. Someone on the opposite end of that, who was kind of coming up around the same time, and that's Bill Cosby.
Yes.
He again I thought you were going somewhere else with that conversation.
He's still stand up today. I watched the documentary Comedian done by Jerry Seinfeld, which is a pretty old, but he talks about how his number one person he always went to was Bill Cosby, mainly because both of them are kind of clean comics. But he was a huge stand-up from early on in like the 1950s to his, the Cosby Show, which was huge. It was one of the biggest shows of all time. He has his famous pudding pop commercials. He even has things like Fat Albert. Again, he's still doing stand-up today. And I heard like he had like a 4-hour stand-up show with no intermission, which is crazy to me, but I heard it's really good.
And it's impressive too, because he's got to be like, what, 80?
Yeah, he is up there. He's getting a little cranky in his age today. I know he's not a big fan of pretty much any type of comedy today for the most part, but I do think he should be mentioned because he was such a comedic presence for such a huge amount of time. So I don't know what you guys think about him.
I think he's iconic, and I actually would have no trouble at all putting him on this list. I wouldn't be against that at all. I mean, maybe his comedy is not for everyone per se, but I think, like you said, his versatility to be able to do TV, voice acting, and his stand-up, and then to do it for such a long time and to keep people coming to see him, I think that speaks for itself. And just the other people that he's influenced too. I mean, he's definitely a legend. No doubt there.
Greg, what do you think?
I have a neat little maybe story, and I want to preface it. I do not like racism. I think it's total bullshit. I'm not usually friends or fans of people that are racist, but there's one family friend who is, which I can't really picture him as being racist, but he apparently is. And this guy, he goes to Bill Cosby shows, so the fact that he's got people going to his shows that are like that is just freaking incredible in my mind. And he definitely was a person from my childhood. I used to watch the Bill Cosby show all the time, get your little life lessons, and definitely the Jell-O pudding. Yeah, I definitely could see him going on there.
Okay.
Nice.
I'll put him on the short list for now. I'm kind of keeping a running list of the people. Then once we kind of sputter out, we can kind of try to limit this down a little bit, because or 4 people is, that's when it's going to get really hard. But I feel like I've been kind of hogging in the mic here a little bit. Any other names people are thinking of that we haven't been mentioned yet?
I guess there's a few that I would like to throw out that, I don't necessarily know if they would belong on the Mount Rushmore. I think they deserve to be mentioned, like a lot of the other ones. But I guess just to throw them out there, like maybe some honorable mentions before we wrap up. And some of those are people like Steve Martin.
Yes.
A lot of good SNL work. And we can expand on these. We can come back to these if any of you guys want to. But see, you got people like Steve Martin. You got Leslie Nielsen, a lot of slapstick stuff. Who did the reverse, by the way. He got into like dramatic acting first, and then realized he had a knack for comedy and slapstick, and then he went into that direction. So he kind of did the reverse of a lot of other comedians. Tim Conway, I mentioned before on the Carol Burnett show, his career was kind of limited to a degree, but still a very funny guy. Rodney Dangerfield, a fantastic stand-up comedian, but in my mind, kind of a one-trick pony, if you will. With the no respect stuff. Never really expanded into other areas or anything.
Chuck is giving him no respect.
He'll probably do a stand-up routine about this. I love some of his. He's the king of one-liners. I love his one-liners and stuff. I could just listen to him for hours. But I guess like John Candy was somebody I think we all love. That guy was hilarious. And then Frank Caliendo you mentioned before, and then also Adam Sandler. He's hard to argue against too, with all his movies and stuff, SNL stuff.
Well, they've been kind of going the shitter lately.
Yeah.
He's kind of got the Eddie Murphy disease going on too.
Yeah. We have a name for it.
Yeah, Eddie Murphy shouldn't have gotten to that prostitute. I think that's where he got it from.
Some other ones too that I was thinking of. I mentioned it earlier. We talked about Mel Brooks, and I think he kind of covers this. But Charlie Chaplin of like silent films, or Buster Keaton. They really were the originators of slapstick comedy in movies. Also, Charlie Chaplin has like an iconic look to him, though he also kind of looks like Hitler. So that's also kind of a bad thing. People might mistake what you're trying to do there with if you have someone who looks like Hitler on your Mount Rushmore. Might misinterpret that. So that might be an issue. Also, this might seem kind of out of left field, but if you think about it, it makes sense. And it's not a real person, so that might be kind of weird. But Homer Simpson. And the reason being, think about like how much animation comedy is like dominating right now. You literally had the animation domination, but South Park, Futurama, American Dad, all these different shows. And it all started, I guess it didn't technically start with The Simpsons. People will probably say like the Flintstones. But really what kicked it off was in the 90s with Homer Simpson. And again, you see Homer Simpson's face, people exactly know who it is. Like, worldwide. Maybe, it doesn't count because he's a cartoon character, so he can't really expand his horizons all that much. He can't really show up and stand up or anything like that. But I do think when we talk about like comedy as a whole, his face is one that comes up. We talked about stand-up comedies because we mentioned Richard Pryor. You have to mention George Carlin. Similar to Richard Pryor, he never really tried to get into movies. He did some here and there, like Jersey Girl, which is something he'd probably like to forget. People like Jon Stewart, who's on The Daily Show, or even like some of the other late night people. Even we talked about Johnny Carson, but like Jay Leno and David Letterman, they have certainly had impact within their own right. And another director, kind of on the same lines as Mel Brooks, but maybe more like if Mel Brooks is more slapstick, this director is more. And I don't say like, Woody Allen has his slapstick moments too, but you know he has some of the greatest romantic comedies of all time with stuff like Manhattan or Annie Hall. You know, he has his own issues beyond comedy, so maybe he's another person we don't want to associate with beyond his movies. But those are some of the names I had. Any other names we just throw out?
John Belushi and Chris Farley.
Good choices.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good choices. You know what really sucks about that is like if they didn't unfortunately pass away long before their time, they probably would be on this list, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the sad part. I mean,
the other part of it is too, I would like to see them interact with a lot of today's comedians.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe teaming up Chris Farley with like a Will Ferrell and making movies like that. That would be. There's no doubt they would have really made some home runs there.
David Spade would still have a career.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people we may be forgetting, but I do think we got a lot of the heavyweights. I even thought way back when to like someone like Mark Twain, who is known for a lot of great comedic quotes, but he was not just in comedy. He had so much more. So, I mean, you can even say like something like William Shakespeare because he has like famous comedies, but again, he's not just in comedy. He's got so much more going on.
There's one final one I would like to mention.
Better blow our minds, Chuck. Better blow our minds.
Yes, and it would be Nicolas Cage.
That blew my mind in a different way.
Some of his acting performances are extremely laughable. Very funny, but it doesn't intend to be.
Would you really have some, or was that one who you were mentioning?
No, that was my point. Just wanted to provide some levity there.
Okay, so I kind of cut it down to like the ones that seemed like we had strongest yes reactions to for the most part. So far, that was Bill Cosby, Mel Brooks, Lucille Ball, Carol Burnett, Bill Murray, and Johnny Carson. So that's 1, 2, 3. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. So we have 6 people there. We got to kind of cut that down to 4. And I guess we can kind of decide between Lucille Ball and Carol Burnett. We talked about having at least one of them. And I'm leaning a little bit more towards Lucille Ball just because I do think she is a tad bit more iconic. Just some of like the skits, like I'm thinking of that one with like she worked at some candy factory that like it's been parodied left and right.
The Vitamina Vegemin.
Yeah. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards her just because of that, and just because like her show still runs in syndication today, where Carol Burnett's isn't as much. With something like a variety show, it's a little harder for that to like the carry on. But I do think Lucille Ball still. I mean, I remember seeing like parodies of that when I was a kid on Tiny Toons, and like I'm leaning towards her. I don't know how you feel, Chuck, if you agree, or I do think Carol Burnett's a legitimate choice, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could go either way on that. I mean, both of them were terrific. I think I could definitely agree with you there. I think Lucille Ball is maybe more of a household name, so maybe for that reason alone, maybe her influence was a little greater. I wouldn't have a problem with putting her in there.
Greg, do you agree?
Yeah, I haven't really watched much Carol Burnett, so I'd agree with Lucille Ball. I think she is a great presence for women to be on there. I feel kind of bad that we only have one, but I seriously can't really think of any other women besides Amy Poehler or Tina Fey that could really make the list. And I think that she's a better role model, I guess. I don't know if she makes a good role model, but I'm going to go with Lucille Ball.
So that brings us down to 5, but now I think it gets really hard because we have Johnny Carson, Bill Murray, Mel Brooks, and Bill Cosby. So we got to think of which one of those would make the cut, would not make the cut.
Well, I think we all pretty much gave Bill Murray a yes, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we got him and Lucille Ball as our 2.
I think Bill Cosby was a big one with all of us as well.
Yeah.
This is the way we can handle it. Out of Bill Cosby, Mel Brooks, and Johnny Carson, which one do we feel the strongest about? Greg, are you saying you feel the strongest about Mel?
Well, out of those
Bill
3,
Cosby?
I feel strongest about Mel Brooks.
Chuck, what about you?
I would say Bill Cosby would be the strongest. probably.
And then I feel strong probably about Johnny Carson, so that did not help at all.
I would put Carson second if that helps. I don't know.
I'm thinking stand up, and well, Bill Cosby stand up too. Dang it, this is where it gets tough. I'm inclined to go Johnny Carson, Mel Brooks. The reason being, I think Johnny Carson kind of encapsulates like stand up as a whole, because we talked about how much he had an influence on stand up. Well, Mel Brooks kind of hits the movie end. I guess Bill Murray does a little bit, but more of that slapstick type of comedy. So I feel like that kind of encapsulates a lot where Lucille Ball is than the female comic. I'm really looking at Bill Cosby versus Johnny Carson, and I'm thinking more so as someone who had impact within the genre. I just think it's a little bit more Carson. So that's why I would probably go him above. I don't know what you guys are thinking. You don't have to go with what I think. I guess, I don't know. This is tough. I guess maybe we'll do it at the other end. Who do you feel least strongly about with those three, Chuck?
Although he had some really great stuff, I would feel the least strongly about Mel Brooks, just because I don't think his reach and his influence was as great as Cosby and Carson. Even though the stuff he did do was fantastic. That's just my personal feeling. I don't know. What
about you, Greg?
I kind of go Mel Brooks, Bill Cosby, and then Johnny Carson. It's kind of more of a personal, what I've seen kind of more of, and kind of what I grew up with than anything else.
I'm pretty pliable. I mean, I could go either way on these.
Yeah. I mean, it's really cutting it tight here.
Shit, we're doing a Reagan on here.
We'll do like the X-Men posters from Days of Future Past, and it'll be like two faces. Well, it does seem like Bill Cosby would be the next person, because Chuck and Greg, you're both really high on him. I'm pretty high on him too. So it does seem that based upon, if we're going to do a seeding type of thing, it would probably be Bill Cosby. And you can't deny his influence. So then it becomes like Mel Brooks and Johnny Carson. Talked about Johnny Carson's comedy may not hold up, but Mel Brooks's does. Johnny Carson, like I said, he has huge influence, but like we have stand up already. We don't really have someone that fits into the mold of what Mel Brooks does. So
yet, if you look at our opening statement of why we're doing this, if you give someone Johnny Carson, they're gonna understand the world of comedy. To me, Greg, what do you say? Did you just get stabbed? You're like A2.
Yes, I promised Max Brooks that I'd get his father through to the Mount Rushmore of comedians. I seriously don't have a problem with either of them going on for the most part. Just kind of a personal preference of what I've seen more, and kind of my favorite word, who I feel more nostalgic about.
Yeah. You make a good point, Chuck, that if you see Johnny Carson, you see his work, his body of work, and the influence he has, you'll understand comedy. I do think you will understand a certain comedy with Mel Brooks, but like we mentioned, he kind of stopped with Dracula Dead and Loving It. He hasn't done much outside the world of movies. I don't know. He's a legend, no doubt. I'm almost inclined to put Johnny Carson and Mel Brooks on and keep Bill Cosby off, but I'm fine with kind of putting in Bill Cosby, Lucille Ball, Bill Murray, and Johnny Carson. How do we feel about that final four of Bill Cosby? So you have stand-up, you have his television, you have all that for nearly 50 or 60 years of comedy. Yeah, you have Lucille Ball. I mean, talk about female comedy here and her influence. Bill Murray, who's just a legend, who's more of modern comedy, and then Johnny Carson, who gets into stand-up and late night TV and that type of comedy. Do we feel like we have a good broad barometer of comedy there?
I feel very strongly about that, actually. Another point I would make, too, is unfortunately, there's probably a lot of people that aren't real familiar with Mel Brooks, just because of the fact that he was a director and his face isn't really out there.
That's a good point.
I mean, it doesn't take away from anything that he's done, certainly not, but I think the four that we have are really iconic, and I think that would give a good sample group to me. I feel very, very comfortable with those four.
Greg, what do you think?
I think
Yay or nay?
no matter what we come up with, I will be upset at. No matter what we come up with, I'm going to be upset. Just the way
I'm
it is.
upset with myself. Yeah. Yeah. It's tough because comedy's such a gigantic, subjective type of thing.
I think we should just leave it how it is. I think we've got a good one. We seriously, it's a hard thing to determine for this, the last spot on here. Not last spot in our minds, but last spot on the mountain. And maybe this will be a good discussion for people to leave comments about and maybe tell us where we went wrong and stuff. But I think we essentially have the mountain set.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're pretty much set there. So yeah, you make a good point. We'll get in all the ways you can yell at us later on when we end the show. But I think we have a solid Mount Rushmore there. We'll get out the chisels and the dynamite, like Greg said, and we'll start getting working. I guess the question is, where do you do it? I don't know. That's a whole nother discussion. But we like to end each letter. We like to end each letter.
Like to end each letter with an episode.
We like to end each episode with a letter. And Greg, you're up this week. What will you be talking about?
All right. Well, I have something where I just sent you guys a link to. There was an article that I read, which Dan will hopefully put on the website for you guys to see. But there was this guy got pulled over and got a ticket for trying to avoid a pothole. So I wrote a message to that man, whose name is his last name's Mo. So, which is a little weird with how I'm going to say, "Dear Mr. Mo." Just seems weird. But here we go. Dear Mr. Mo, I have recently read about a predicament you have had. Let me tell you, man, from what the article says, you pretty much got screwed. A ticket for avoiding a pothole is a dick move. But if you were texting while driving, then the dick is you. I definitely get the need to start swerving to avoid the plague that is potholes. We too in Pennsylvania have fallen victim to a plague of them. Some are so large that they can't be avoided. My Subaru, named Sue, has taken damage from one such monster. Here's what I see happening if your ticket goes through for potholes. Forget texting for the moment. You have to pay. People then obeying the law then have to let their cars get beat to shit. People get fed up with the government. This would be really quick if it was me. And they would send the bill for damages to the government. So then we'd be falling deeper into an economic debt with our government getting really far in debt. I don't think this is a scenario the government wants to go through, as it would quickly go into debt, or in this day and age, further into debt. So good luck with the fine, Greg. Dear government, fix the damn roads and this bullshit wouldn't be a problem.
Good point.
So there was kind of two letters there. My one to the government was kind of short.
Dear Senator, stop earmarking funds for pet projects so that we can get the funding to fix our roads.
That'd be nice.
And ironically, on my way home from work today, I wrote this last night, but on my way home from work, I saw that they have spray painted all the potholes that they want to fill in.
Well, the first step is admitting you have a problem.
Very, very true. All right, that will bring it to a close for this week. Make sure to tune in next week, same time, same network, same podcast feed. Also, make sure to send in some of your feedback. You can send it to us going by geekcastradio.com, emailing us at feedback@geekcastradio.com, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. But for now,
this has been Chuck.
This has been Greg, or Mel Brooks, or Johnny Carson. We're not quite sure.
And this has been Dan, who's still not funny.
And we've been talking in circles. We'll see you next week.
You're funny.
Funny how?
Funny like the clown?
Like clown, you amuse me.
Alright, cool. I guess that's good.
I really have to take a piss. I don't want to pee in my room. Hold on, I'll be back. We'll add more funny stuff after I get back. For the end.
Quick, is R. Kelly in the closet? Because you always have that to go.
No, I have a funny story about that.
opposite end of Richard Pryor. You know, a dirty kind of cock. No, Jesus, not dirty cock.
What? I guess he influenced you too, Dan.
Yeah.
Dirty Thoughts by Dan.
Think of like people like Johnny Seinfeld, John Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld, Jesus Christ, John Seinfeld.
What's the deal with Dan not getting my name right?